It's 7 p.m. I'm going to call the School District Budget Committee meeting of February 7th to order and welcome everyone. Will we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, now we have a little housekeeping here with getting our remote members connected up.
Hello?
Hi, Carol, you're live. Can you hear us all right?
Yep, fine.
All right, I'm going to put you on hold and we'll conference in everybody else. Thank you.
Okay. Hello?
Hi, is this Gina?
No, it's Michelle.
Oh, Michelle, sorry. Got my numbers mixed up. Michelle, you're
No
live.
worries.
Can you hear us all right?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect.
I'm going to conference you in and then we're going to try to get one more person on.
Okay. Hello?
Hello, is this Gina?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Gina, you're live. Can you hear us all right?
I can, thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to conference you in and just hold on for just a second. Hi, everybody. Can all three of you hear us?
I can. Yeah, I can.
Maybe rock and roll.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Michelle, this is the chairman, Chuck.
Hi, how are you, Chuck?
Can you tell me where you are and if you are alone?
I am in my office and I'm alone.
And where is your office located?
Andover, Massachusetts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gina, can you tell us where you are and if you're alone?
Yes, I am in my home office within my house, and yes, I'm alone.
Thank you. Carol?
Yep, I'm in Satellite Beach, Florida, and my husband is here.
Thank you very much. Do we have any public participation this evening? Anybody from the public that would like to address the Budget Committee in some fashion? Going once? Twice? All right, I will close public participation. And I will ask everyone's forbearance with the liberty that I am going to take. I have here a report of the superintendent. And the reason I want to read it is because the only thing that separates us from our predecessors is time. And I think in these days, when we try to establish community under difficult circumstances, or so we think, it's not something that has been suffered in the past by the people that lived here as well. And so I think you will find this, if you listen closely, very informative to our contemporary dispositions. The year is the year ending 1919. To the school board of the School District of Merrimack, I herewith submit my 5th annual report as superintendent of the schools of Merrimack and my 3rd report as superintendent of the McGaw Normal Institute. The year last past, serious in its events, amazed by its problems, overshadowed by a world war, has disturbed our civic life and all the enterprises in which our people are engaged more severely than any period since the War for the Union. And unquestionably, the schools have felt this disturbance as much, and perhaps more than any American institution. The great advance in the cost of living, in its every detail, and the higher wages paid in other enterprises caused so many women to leave the profession of teaching that it is made difficult to secure teachers to fill vacancies thus caused. In some states, schools were closed owing to a lack of teachers. The selected draft and the voluntary enlistment of those who were intensely anxious to answer their country's call took so many men from the ranks of teaching that it was impossible to obtain male principals and instructors for vocational schools. The widespread epidemic of influenza closed the schools for a period, causing further disturbances in the continuous work of the schools. Considering the above hindrances, our schools have accomplished as much work and have made as great progress as could be reasonably expected. The teachers who remained at their post of duty, desiring to do their part in winning democracy for the world, enjoyed the double duty and privilege of teaching and working for liberty. This class of teachers who listened to the call of duty rather than the call of money won universal respect and the first consideration for positions of advancement. Educational reforms have followed many of the great wars of history, and today, as never before, the problems of education are being discussed by the legislative bodies of all civilized countries. In many of the states of the United States, there is an educational agitation and an apparent strong public conviction that educational institutions ought to be developed under the state and federal guidance rather than to remain under the isolated local administration. 43 state legislatures will be in session in 1919 and will consider important educational legislation in its various and varied forms and relations. In accordance with the proclamation of Governor John Bartlett, the legislation which is planned for the consideration of the present legislature has to do with the equalization of school opportunities. This would require a minimum school year of 36 weeks, certified teachers, universal supervision, medical inspection, and school nurses for all schools, night schools for teaching the English language to illiterate foreigners as an Americanization measure, and the development of technical courses in high schools. The need of enactment of the above into the laws of our state is apparent to all whose minds have been awakened to the new condition to which the world must adjust itself. We are not so different from our predecessors. So tonight, amongst all of the domestic interests of our community, we're going to be working on first warrant articles. So if I could have our very able superintendent of finance. Good evening, Matt.
Evening, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Bill.
Please excuse me for not having included our superintendent and chief educator of the district, Bill Olson.
That's all right. I was late getting to the microphone. So. Good evening, everyone.
He's gonna ask me to do this at some point. Do you want, is this our cue to let's go? To do the warrant articles?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, Pat, everybody have a copy of the warrant that's approved by the school board? I knew that. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. The first article you don't have to do anything with. It's just to elect all necessary school district officers for the ensuing year. It's a ballot vote. It has all the openings and positions that need to be filled during the course of the next school year. Article 2 is something that the Budget Committee does not need to vote on because it's not a moneyed warrant article, but just for your information. It's a standard article we've been doing for decades. It's allowing the school board to accept, without further action of the voters, any gifts, legacies, devices, real property. I can give you an example. A number of years ago, there's 13 acres to the south of the high school property that goes down to the hill towards Buckley's, called the Ronka property. And that was gifted to the school district and accepted by the school board under Superintendent Jim O'Neill. Also, I believe in 2009, there was an acre of land that was given to us by the town of Merrimack that is adjacent to the end of that parking lot right there, which is a nice square acre, nice and flat, pine trees. It can make a wonderful field at some point in time if we choose to go such, so the school board could accept that. Without this article, you'd have to petition Superior Court or have a warrant article. So it just makes life a lot easier when people want to give us things aside from cash. If they want to give us cash, we have a RSA for that allows us to accept cash. In fact, the Merrimack delegation last night was discussing that anything over $5,000, we have to hold a public hearing. And they were talking about making that threshold $20,000, right, Bill? I believe so. And so that's something that, Carol Lang started way back in the day, because if somebody gave you $1, you had to hold a public hearing. So it didn't make much sense to post notice thereof of a public hearing in the newspaper when you're accepting $1 from somebody. So the law got changed to make it a little more reasonable. Article 3 is the teacher's contract. It's a 3-year contract starting in 23-24. It's $1.2 million, basically all 3 years. It is a 4% increase, another 4% increase, and in the last year it's a 3.75% increase. It was voted on unanimously by the school board 5-0-0. I don't know, Mr. Moe, if you want me to go through these, you want me to just read them and then you can deliberate, or you want me to just, it's your pleasure.
Given the relatively short nature of this, why don't we just go through them, Matt, and
Okay.
then we will revisit them
That sounds good.
as a committee.
Thank you. The next article is Article 4. It pertains back to Article 3, which is the labor contract article. What it is basically doing is, if the labor contract article should fail, it allows you to hold a special meeting to look at the cost items only on the warrant article. You have to go through the same process as if it was a regular warrant article. School board, budget committee, deliberative session, voting, everything like that. But without this, you'd have to petition Superior Court to get an exception to hold a special meeting because of a labor contract failing. And Superior Court does not really deem such as an emergency. Maybe something with a building that was, needed to raise and appropriate money, health and safety, life safety issues, that would be an emergency. They view not passing a teacher's contract. We would think it would kind of be an emergency, I would say, but they don't think so. So this gives the school board the authority to hold one special meeting to address the cost items only. You guys don't vote on this, but let's roll right through them. Article 5 is to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,108,669 to replace a section of roof at James Mastercola Upper Elementary School. That was on the capital improvement program that we went through with the Planning and Building Committee, and it's around 25,000 square feet of roofing area that's been out of warranty since both 2014, and a little piece has been 8,563 square feet have been out of warranty since 1996. So Tom, he walks the roofs every single year. He goes up on them with a number of people. We've hired a specialist in roof analysis and evaluation. We've even done thermal imaging scans of the roofs to see if there's any moisture embedded in the insulation. You could tell if something is damp. And if it's damp, even though it's not leaking, what it's going to do is it's going to lose its R values. So you're going to be once insulation's wet, R value becomes nothing. So it loses the insulation value, and it could cause deck rot, which is the corrugated deck that's underneath the roof, and then it's with steel bar joist underneath that. So it could be an issue. So this is up on the schedule. The next one would be another section of JMU's, and another one, and then another one, and then we wrap around to the high school with two other roofing projects. So that is one that's there. Last year we did Thornton's Ferry for around the same price. I think it was $1.4 million. That was a great project. These projects are all done in the summertime, because usually you don't want to do a roof when you're having school in session with a bunch of guys up on the roof, moving equipment and whatever around. So it's usually done in the summertime, and we hope we have a dry summer and they can get it all done in time. It's usually, no matter how dry the summer is, it's always right before the first day of school. I don't know, Bill, in his previous incarnation, it's always right before the kids are rolling in. They're taking down the stakes that hold the scaffolding and everything like that in, and it's like, it's always last second getting it done. Last one is the operating budget. This operating budget that you see is $88,329,637. This is the operating budget that the school board proposed after the cuts that were made. I know you were talking about looking at the budget before the school board had made the cuts. That's your option. But this is what was deliberated on by the school board. And if that article fails, you can do two things. You can accept the default budget, or you can hold another meeting. The governing body can hold another meeting to come up with some sort of compromise. The default budget is $87,167,947,000, and the calculation of the default budget is basically by RSA. It's a portion of the RSA 40:13, which is SB2, as we used to call it back in the day. It's to give you kind of a safeguard if your operating budget fails, you know, you don't raise zero, you have to raise something. So it's made up of the prior year's approved budget, less special warrant articles, less items of a one-time nature, not particularly going to reoccur in the future. So this budget starts out with the budget that was approved last year, which was around 87 million. We take out the special warrant articles, which was the TFS roof. That's a minus 1.4 million. There was a change in the debt service. It went down $44,000. Contractual obligations we have is health insurance and transportation. That was around a $560,000 increase. We have a contracted salary obligation. This is basically the support staff contract that was passed in previous years. It's only around $46,000. We've been keeping the paraprofessional line rather flat in the recent years because of turnover and that body of employees. So there was no need to put this up. This contracted salaries does not include any increases that are not voted on by the governing body on the ballot. That's kind of a change from like 3 or 4 years ago, because back in those days, if the board offered Bill or myself or Amy or the leadership team, the principals and assistant principals, an employment contract through the advise and confer process or just through deliberations, I could put those in the default budget because it was a contract that the school board entered into with a group and an organization, an individual, but they changed it to take that out and not allow me to do that anymore. So our contracted salary increases that's been previously negotiated, they're not in the default budget. It also includes the pass-through account, which is the food service account. You know, that's on both sides of the ledger. There's the revenue and expenditure side. It includes special ed, special services. Everything in the special ed budget is dictated by, you know, IEPs, free and appropriate publication for everybody in the least restrictive environment possible. Basically, it's essentially federal law. And then we have to maintain our buildings in a clean, healthy, safe environment to garner school approval, and we have to heat them. We can't put the buildings down at 40 degrees and tell the kids to wear sweaters to, you know, save some money in the winter months. So we have to keep it at a certain temperature. There is no temperature that school approval dictates, but, you know, let's use common sense. You don't want people freezing. And then once you take all of that and put it together, then you get the 87,167,000. So that is in essence what the default budget is comprised of. So that explains the last warrant article, which is approved by the board by a vote of 5-0-0, and it waits your review. That's it. Nice, short, and sweet, to the point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to adjudicate the warrant articles at this time. I know that many of you have ideas about adjustments to the budget, so this won't be a final bottom line on Article 6. But I think that's a good starting point for us to adjudicate the warrant articles. We can revisit it at some point when we know more confidently what the operating budget recommendation from the board is going to be, if that meets with the committee's pleasure. So let's go back to Article 3 and ask for a motion on Article 3 to recommend.
Motion to carry Article 3.
Second?
Second.
Excellent. Pat, if we could have, excuse me, deliberation, Carol, Michelle, and Gina.
Yep,
I'm all set.
I'm all set.
I'm good. Thank you.
And the remainder of the committee, is there any further discussion on the motion? Naomi?
This is just an affirmation. Those of you who were on the committee last year will recall that we had discussions regarding the multi-year need to bring our teachers to the place they have to be and other staff to the place they have to be in terms of their salaries. And I appreciate that we've continued on that path.
Yeah, if I could just kind of add to that a little bit. I know, usually I should just shut up at this point, but I'm just going to add to it a little bit.
Matt, I want to assure you that we will always appreciate your counsel and your input at any instant that you so desire to provide it for us.
Thank you very much. Last year, like Naomi said, we found in every single cell, basically, of the contract that we were like $5,000 to $6,000 behind, like a 13-town area average, like the Bedfords, the Amherst, the Nashwas, all our competing districts. Even I think they dipped down in a Mass a little bit because they can compete also. That got us there. This is going to get us even further closer to that area average, but it's still not going to surpass anything because those towns that we're competing with, they're also working on contracts too. So it's just trying to keep competitive with our surrounding towns in order to attract the best and the brightest that we can for the school district. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any other comments from the committee? Seeing none, Pat, would you please call the roll on that?
Okay. Dan,
Yes.
Mackenzie,
Yes.
Naomi Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Gina Groff,
Yes.
Michelle Bronchuk,
Yes,
Chuck Mower,
Yes.
Naomi Halter,
Yes.
Ellen Wilson,
Yes.
Carol Lang,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Rachel.
Yes.
That is unanimous. No, it isn't. Shane. I'm
Yes.
sorry. You're at the top of the list there. $12-0-0.
It is unanimity from the committee. I so declare it. And I would like to represent on behalf of the committee how important I think this article is, not only in support of our teachers, but in support of our administrative efforts district-wide. We are all in this together. Thank you very much. And Article 5. Can I have a motion on Article 5?
I'll make the motion to keep the article as is.
And I'll second.
Second. Do we have any deliberation on this? Carol, Gina, Michelle?
nope, no, I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Shane, I know you're on the Planning and Building Committee. I wondered if you might want to offer some insight relative to this.
Yeah, Tom is in tune with every single roof in the district. We go over them in the Planning and Building Committee. We go over his plan. Matt mentioned once a year. I think it's actually 2 or 3 times a year. Yeah, you know, we've gone through them all. They're all, you know, anything that he's going to is well out of warranty. It's necessary. You know, it's great. And Tom, you know, knowing Tom, the much I know him, he's not wasting any money. So, absolutely.
Thank you, Shane. Naomi?
So whenever a roof goes on a warrant article, which they tend to, there's always the question of what if the warrant article fails? Because there's this delicate balance between putting things where they can be chosen specifically by the voters and the potential for doing without if we're told no. And so I wondered if you could speak slightly to its being a warrant article and how that would be handled in either direction.
Okay. A few years ago, there was a law passed affectionately called the No Means No Law. And so if it is voted down in a warrant article, then that purpose cannot pop up in the operating budget if the board would deem any unutilized expenditures that they would have. So they couldn't replace the roof. This is like replacing the roof. But it doesn't prohibit us from putting patches on the roof if need be. So that's what the issue is.
Another legislative example of containing the aggressive nature of education to actually accomplish something.
Well, the whole premise, if I can just kind of pontificate a little bit, I was around when Dave Hess, Ray Langer, and a bunch of other people got together with a bunch of other people who created SB2. And the sole purpose of that, I was working on the town side at the time, was to contain the school district spending. And they thought if they brought it out and got rid of the traditional town meeting when you get there and discuss things and, you know, have impassioned pleas in the microphone and then walk out with a budget, they didn't think that was enough representation of the public. So they thought if they put it out to ballot votes that the school spending would decline. They were kind of surprised that it didn't have the effect that they thought it would. So then they put in these other rules, which are safeguards, which are fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with it, but it is kind of an area where, you know, they're trying to limit what we can do. In Mass, they have Prop 2.5. You know, it's all over the place. So it's our version of that, essentially.
Thank you, Matt. Any other?
May I ask a question?
I was just going to ask if there were other comments or questions, considerations, or reflections from anybody. And that would certainly be you, Carol.
Okay. I guess I'd like some input as to the change between funding these strictly on the ballot as opposed to when we were using capital reserve funds.
I can touch on that one piece. I was actually going to talk about that. We had talked about that in the last planning and building meeting as well. And when they got away from reserve funds and to warrant articles, obviously the reserve fund is gone now. So as we go through, I think it was the next 3 or 4 years, once we get through that, those are the large roof projects. And then we go back to recommending reserve funds. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, essentially you're right on. When you look at the end of this plan, and then another 3 years out from that, there's maybe a 6 or 7 year period where we don't have any roofs that are off warranty that should not be problematic. So that would be the perfect time to put in place capital reserve funding, probably to the same amount as your last roof that you did, to build up that reserve into the future. We used to have capital reserve accounts for paving, for roofing, for a lot of things, but those got drained over the years and they never got replenished. The only two robust capital reserve funds we have is an emergency repair fund. That's around $500,000, of which the school board is agents to expend. And we also have a special ed capital expendable trust fund, which the school board is agents to expend, just in case there was a very high tuitioned student, special needs student come into the district that special services did not budget for. So that's one of those safeguards that we do have. So that's in capital reserve. They're both around $500,000 each, and they're at a nice spot right now.
Thank you, Matt. Carol,
Thank you.
do you have more?
I'm all set.
Thank you. Michelle or Gina?
I'm all set.
I'm good. Thanks, Chuck.
Any other committee member? Lee?
Hi, Matt. I just had a question about these other capital reserve funds that are no longer active or funded well. You mentioned that there was paving. Can you describe what, maybe there's a list of what other funds there are or were?
Yeah, there's roofing, paving. There was an asbestos removal fund for floor tiles and everything like that, but we depleted that when we abated all the known asbestos in the building. This cafeteria that you're sitting in right now used to have the smaller 9x9 tiles. Bill's real familiar with those. And if it was a 9x9, chances are it was an asbestos floor tile, and the mastic that held the floor tile to the cement slab was also asbestos. So you had to come in and scrape them off and tent everything off and have people who are certified and such do the work. So that fund was closed out after the asbestos was done, but we still have let's say $3,000 to $4,000 in the paving fund and the roofing fund. We didn't want to disband them because at some point in time we were thinking that it would be appropriate to start funding those again like we did in the past. We also have a remedial reading and math fund that, just in case Title I funding goes away, there's still money in there to supplement what would be lost from the state.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Are we ready to call the vote? Pat, will you please call the roll?
Shane,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Gina,
Yes.
Michelle, Mackey.
Can I ask a quick question? Should I be voting? I abstain.
Okay. Mackenzie,
Yes.
Naomi Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Naomi Halter,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Michelle Bronchuk.
Yes.
12-0-1.
It is so declared. Let's move on to Article 6. I think it's rather perfunctory at this point. Rather than holding it any longer, it was a good starting point for us. Can I have a motion for the operating budget?
Don't do
No?
that,
You want to hold it in abeyance?
please.
All right. That's what we'll do. It is officially in abeyance. All right. That is your starting point, though.
I see a few faces that I want to clarify this for. I believe that what just happened is that since we're going to be discussing the work sessions and the items, it makes sense to vote on the entire budget once that is concluded instead of now.
Thank you, Naomi. All right. I guess we're going to start with district-wide and food service. If anybody would like to make any motions for adjustment to the budget. Can I catch you all by surprise? Well, while you're thinking about it, I have an adjustment that I would like to propose for the district-wide budget. We had something in last year's budget for the school board contingency. I believe it was $100,000. It wasn't carried over to this budget, and I would like to propose that we add it to this budget and increase it to $150,000. And I would like to make a motion to that effect and see if I can get a second to discuss it as a business item.
I'll second Chuck.
Okay. We've been doing very well, I think, this past year in the school district. Everybody's very excited about our direction and our coming together and our collaboration and the widespread interest in seeing us reverse some of the effects of COVID. Just like in 1919 when they were trying to reverse the effects of the Spanish flu. Again, we're not so much different today than then, except there's more of us. And that's a good thing because there's more of us to share the load. But we have no redundancy in our administration. And if there were some unfortunate circumstance to take place, it might be some time before we found a ready and able solution to that problem. And so as not to have that exposure to liability, I'm offering this continued contingency fund in that one of our administrators was in an accident or had to have surgery or was out for a while. It's very difficult to run a business this size with 3 people, and they do a remarkable job. And I wanted to ensure that if something happened, we had the purpose and the financial capability of seeking the temporary assistance that was needed to take up that slack so that we wouldn't miss a beat, despite how much we were, sincerely affected by what happened to an individual. We'd like to avoid that if possible. That and other things. The contingency fund is just that. It's a contingency, which could help alleviate an unforeseen judgment or any number of other things that we might not be able to easily forecast tonight, but could nevertheless easily happen. So I think it would be prudent on our part to have that purpose in our present budget and fund it at that level. Any other consideration to give to that from committee members?
I have a question.
Yes, Carol.
Given how long we have been searching for a long-term solution to the superintendent position, and we've also had a lot of turnover in the assistant superintendent for curriculum, how practical is it if such a situation were to arise to actually find somebody to fill such a need?
Well, my personal opinion would be very practical and very easy, and that this financial purpose would allow that to take place more easily than any other mechanism. On the other hand, perhaps the other side of your question rests not in the budget committee's hands, but in the school board's hands. And I'm only offering this because I think a contingency fund like that reduces our exposure to liability for unforeseen accidents that might happen to us. Again, not solely that somebody may be taken ill, but for judgments that may happen against us, or other fiduciary responsibilities that the school board would have to tap into that fund to adjudicate.
You just mentioned judgment, so this would cover if somebody were to win a judgment against the district?
Or against the school board. This line item purpose is specifically a school board contingency fund. It was in the budget last year. I'd like to continue it to this year and expand it by $50,000. Yes, Naomi.
Thank you for the thought. I love that you're thinking about things that we might need. I think that's admirable. I have a couple of thoughts. My first one is we did mention this when the school board had our budget discussions with all of the departments. We did, somebody, I think might have been me, asked a question about that line. What was it and why was it zeroed out? And Matt can probably give a better answer than me, but my broad strokes understanding was that it was something to do with dealing with unforeseen things that came up because of COVID, and that we hadn't used it, and we didn't foresee anything where we would need it, and that's why the school board didn't push on, okay, let's put that back in there. Am I representing that correctly?
Yeah, that's precisely why. We had it in there for 2 years. We really weren't sure how much money we were going to get for the ESSER funds that dealt with the COVID and learning loss and everything like that. Since knowing, how much money we received and how we spent it to, help with those situations, we thought that because it was specific to COVID, but a school board contingency fund can be anything you wanted. It's a school board contingency fund. If you had a huge, like Chuck said, huge judgment against the district that far exceeded the legal expenditures of what we have, $50,000 in that line, and you saw the expenditure in the book, it was probably $100K, and we had $50,000 budgeted. If we had, let's say that $100K was $300K, so it could be used for a myriad of things, and it's a legit function code in the reporting of the operating budget, so it can be used for anything.
I have a follow-up question, because I know we do carry insurance for adverse events in the district, and I know that can include legal action and that sort of thing, and I'm sort of curious what the likelihood is that we would come across something where our insurance would not be adequate to cover it.
Well, for instance, somebody sues us for wrongful termination, and the amount is, let's say, I don't know, $50,000, and Primex will pay half, and we'll pay the other half, so we'll be on the hook for $25,000. Or if we have a slip and fall in the parking lot, and it's one of these things where, perhaps we should have, could have, or might have, then Primex would cover half of that. I've seen those situations firsthand before, so that's what it would be for.
Well, I simply wanted to respond in that contingencies are things that we never foresee. Our wonderful, human element is such that, we live by the power of myth. Nothing's ever going to happen to us. And yet all kinds of tragedies and unforeseen circumstances seem to arise no matter how well we plan, no matter how much insurance we have, and so forth. So the thought behind this was to protect us to the extent that I thought we reasonably could, to have a seamless operation, and that something that I think my father would have described as an anchor to windward. You don't always use it, but when you need an anchor to windward, you're awfully glad that it's there. Sure.
I thought of something else. I know we have a capital reserve fund for emergencies. Is that purely like broken things and buildings that need fixing?
Yeah, it's it's a district emergency repair fund. But Bill just mentioned to me, in Westford, they used to, if let's say you have a 1-ton dump truck that's like $90,000, that you get a sander and a spreader on it, and the thing just kaput, and you need to get one. So they used to use it for that.
Shane.
In the district-wide budget this year, I believe it was, we had a $50,000 law line for, I think you mentioned legal line. It was 120 expenditure. So between that and, I know we're in a deflationary period, but we're still looking at inflation. And, I think what it does is it protects the voters too, because if something happens and we have to pull the funds from some other bucket, where are we pulling it from? So it's a contingency. It didn't get used the past 2 years. It's an easy protecting line, and, it's probably not going to get used again, but at least it's there. At least that's my thought.
Well, if in fact it isn't necessary, it simply returns to the voters as a surplus to reduce taxes.
Did it get moved anywhere?
Can I ask another question?
Yes, Carol.
If something that would fall under this category were to come up and we did not have this fund, am I correct in thinking that the district historically always, I hate the word surplus, but I'll use it because I don't know what else to say, but the district always has an overage of money, and so could we just pay whatever came up out of that money?
I don't think that it's quite as simple as that, Carol. If you recall, everything in the budget has to have a purpose, and while the school board has the authority to move money around within the budget, they still have to have a purpose, and a school board contingency fund is a very specific purpose. And to try and shoehorn an unforeseen situation into another category that sort of fits, kind of fits, might fit, or whatever, just provides a difficulty that we can easily anticipate and provide for in simply having a contingency fund, which we once had. And they saw the wisdom in creating it because of COVID, but it was not a mutually exclusive disease, syndrome, virus, whatever situation. A contingency is just that, something that was unforeseen and provides an easy remedy, and even more easily not used if the contingency doesn't arise, which simply means it goes back to create a surplus, which goes back to reduce the overall tax burden. It's a wonderful thing about our budget. We're required to have a surplus, and it always goes back to reduce taxes. If we don't have a surplus because of some unforeseen situation, trying to get supplemental appropriations and so forth is a nightmare none of us even want to contemplate when constructing a budget, when it's so easy to avoid it by constructing a prudent budget, in my opinion. Rachel.
Matt, you could probably answer this. So it looks like, and I think what I heard was, so I can see in 21, 22, nothing was expended from this. To date, this year, has there been anything expended?
No, there has not been.
And did this account exist prior to the 21, 22 school year?
No, it did not.
Going back to as far as you can
Going back
remember?
to what?
Like, so as long as you've been in the district, is this
It's only been 2 years.
the 2 years? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Lee.
Matt, I'd like to hear you answer Carol's question. I don't think you got an opportunity to. If an expenditure like this comes up, is it possible to use the overage or surplus in our budget to compensate that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We have tried to bring in a surplus every single year. We don't want to budget such that everything is so tight that if something happens, we can't hold ourselves accountable for the promises we made the voters on what we're going to do educationally and structurally for this budget, because everything is so tight, and we don't want to get into the habit of, and I've seen a lot of districts do that, come September, your budget's frozen. You don't order anything because things are that tight. We haven't had to do that here, but it has happened in the past. And we did have a year back in, I think, 97 or something like that. Because remember when I first got here, not in 97, but in 2000, I went back and looked at previous reports. And I did notice there was one year where there was a zero fund balance in the general fund. And I found that a little bit odd, but that's okay. Jim helped me out with the explanation of that, which I will not share at this meeting right now.
And what is our typical surplus?
Typical, the last couple of years because of COVID, we've been running around, 8 million, which is really high because lack of being able to, you heard Tom, 14 custodians, we just can't hire them. We had the same issue with paraprofessionals, district-wide.
Prior to that, though,
Prior to that,
three?
getting back to normalcy, it's around 3%. Out of an 80-something million dollars, it's 3%. 3%, 3 million, sorry.
That's what I thought, yeah. I think that would more than cover our expenditures in most of those areas. if
Yeah,
need be.
and when you go for a bond issue, if you go for financing, we did the ventilation project at the district-wide, 72 unit ventilators that we put in to decrease the CO2 levels in classrooms. It was a $4 million lease purchase agreement. 10 years agreement. We got a lease rate on that at 1.99%, which was pretty awesome because they look at our financials and they look specifically at our fund balance to see what we have, because it's a good indicator of our ability to meet future payments of the money that they're lending us. So that's why we've got a better rate. Same thing holds true with any bond issues that may happen in the future. So, we get rated by S&P and everything like that, like just regular companies do. So it's good to look healthy in your financial statements.
Naomi.
So I see this as having two pieces to it of equal importance, and I have a question for each. The first is that I think that in recent and not so recent years, but within the last 10 years or so, the budget has shifted away from saving ahead and towards getting the money as we need it, which is understandable when one is under pressure to do something such as match default or something of that sort. And I'm glad we're reversing that trend, which I think we're working on in terms of thinking about the roofing, in terms of other pieces of that sort. And so from that regard, I think this is an important piece to be doing. Even if we have surplus, what we're doing is saying that we have an intent to save for particular pieces, which is a necessary part of any budget. That said, I'm also hearing, Matt, that you're saying that we do have that coverage in one way or another. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yes, it is. From what we know today, yes, we more than likely do.
Any other comments from the committee?
No, I'm good.
I'm all set.
I'm all set as well.
Thank you. We'll call for a vote. Pat?
Rachel,
No.
Gina,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Ellen,
No.
Naomi Halter,
No.
Michelle Mackey,
Yes.
Michelle Bronchuk,
Yes.
Naomi Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Lee,
No.
Chuck,
Yes.
Mackenzie,
No.
Carol,
No.
Dan,
Yes.
I get 7-5, so let me check that again. It's 7 in favor, 6 against, 7-6.
I declare it a majority as an adjustment to the budget.
Can I just raise a point of order, Chuck?
You can certainly ask for a point of order.
Unless somebody came in that I'm unaware of, I thought we had 12 people, and Pat's numbers just added up to 13.
Michelle Mackey arrived late.
Okay, that clears my question. Thank you.
There's one of the advantages of being
As a
here,
matter of
Carol.
fact, the last vote was 12-0-1, which adds up to 13.
Okay.
All right. Any other adjustments to district-wide? Yes, Naomi.
This is not adjustment. I wanted to speak as part of the liaison group that we thought it was fair and well balanced, and I think you'll speak for yourselves, other members, but that putting it forward as presented makes sense. I also wanted to note that there are potential reductions on the separate sheet that would affect this one, but I believe we're talking about them separately. Is that?
Yeah. All right, let's move to technology, library, media. Are there any motions for adjustments? Yes, Matt.
Yeah, I just want a point of clarification.
Sure.
Are you starting from the number that is in the warrant article, which includes $443,000 worth of reductions? Or are you starting from the administration's budget to the school board and not the school board's budget as presented to the budget committee?
I believe it was the disposition of the committee to not determine what our starting point was. And I was simply asking for adjustments to the overall budget, department by department. That's why I wanted to confirm the article as a starting point and then adjust it later, but the committee has decided that they want to just determine what the overall operating budget is by adjustment. So,
Okay.
yeah,
As long as our numbers match at the end of the evening, that's fine.
yeah, right.
Right.
What's that? I'm confused.
May I?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, my understanding is, and this is convention rather than required, and so it can be changed by the group, that it is in some ways easier to look at the numbers we examined in the book and use them as a starting point, and then discuss the reductions or changes that happened between the administrative budget and the school board's budget as one entity. Now, that does affect, I can see why you asked that now, Matt, because that affects whether or not there would be amendments under this area. My understanding is that discussion of things that would affect this book will happen, but will happen after we've discussed the administration's budget. Does that sound accurate to you, Chuck?
I think something like that, yes. Does that make any better sense?
Naomi, excuse me. The book is the administration's budget.
Yes.
So you are discussing that right now,
The
actually.
administration's budget, but not because we are going to ignore the school board's changes, but because it is simpler to discuss one set of numbers unencumbered by the other.
Okay.
The group can suggest differently. I'm not trying to push that forward. Are there thoughts on that?
I think what I'm hearing is if we speak to numbers, we're speaking to what is in the binders, the administration's budget. Would it be maybe easier to consider the adjustments that the school board accepted as we go through each of those? So you can look at each of those line items in the adjustments and either agree or disagree with those as we're going through.
From my perspective, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. It's just a question of how each person's brain is wired. And so I'm okay either way. We seem to have started with the administrative first and be moving forward. If we're going to shift that, now would be the time.
I'd also like to clarify that the school board made some recommendations about the budget. They're not really adjustments. The adjustments lie wholly within our purview to amend the administrative budget.
I'm confused now because I thought past practice had been the administration submitted their budget to the school board and then the school board submitted their budget to us.
Well, Carol, the past practice was probably a lot of things over any number of years, but the present disposition is that the budget is the budget committee's budget.
Yes, I agree with that. But what are we analyzing? Are we analyzing the administration's budget or the school board's budget?
Well, it's the administration's proposed budget. It's the same budget that they presented to the school board. And the school board made,
Okay,
and the school board made
I can adjust
recommendations.
my thinking.
Yes, thank you, Carol. Thank you, Naomi. So we all good to proceed now? We're working with the administration proposal. We had ample opportunity to discuss with all of the departments and administrative personnel what the budget was about, where reductions might be taken, or what their needs were, or whatever. We are now fully informed, and we are making adjustments to the budget as we see best to make it a prudent budget for the school district. Is there any confusion about that? All right.
I'm sorry, I have one question. Does
Yes.
that mean that if the budget committee wants to implement some of these reductions that were recommended by the school board, that when we're in each individual section, somebody needs to make that a motion to that effect and do that, or?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would also be my intent that any that are not addressed, I will move on at the end so that they are all discussed.
All right. Are there any other adjustments to the district-wide budget?
If I may, it almost kind of begs the question, what is the authority of the school board in the budget process? I mean, does the administration's budget usurp the authority of the school board's budget? Because we could go, take your books back, change them all to represent what the school board had done, and then give you new books and say, here you go. It's just a little bit different that I've ever looked at it, and I know it's just at this point in time I can see kind of both sides, but it just seems to like take the school board out of the mix, because you're let's say, you know, Bill and I were like wild spenders or something like that. You know, we could give a budget that was $100 million. We're not wild spenders, you know, but it's just a little bit different, that's all. Take some getting used to if this is the way we're going to travel into the future.
I agree, Matt. It is a little bit different from what past practice has been. I have studiously taken a look at budget committee operations in the 3 years that I have been chairman, and I've tried my very best to make sure that everyone here is equally respected and equally represented, and to provide for them as chairman the best facilitation that I can. I may have fallen a little short on occasion. I apologize for those things if they have happened. But the community has in the past failed to realize, with internecine warfare, that the budget committee law is that it is the budget committee's budget. And the budget committee alone has the authority to call before it any member of the district administration or staff that it feels is necessary to gain the information appropriate to define a prudent budget, which would then be approved by the voters in some fashion and put in the hands of the school board to make all of the day-to-day decisions about how to how to meet the various goals and strategies of the school board, etc. I don't believe that the budget committee is trying to do anything other than respect very closely the difference between the school board and the budget committee. But when it comes to the budget, that's what the New Hampshire state budget law asks for and requires. And I know it has been different in the past, but so often we find that old saw easy to rely on to make our jobs a little more comfortable or a little more easy or whatever. But I believe I have here probably one of the best budget committees that we've had in the town of Merrimack. And they're all sincerely devoted to exercising the responsibilities that they took an oath to uphold. I don't believe I have misrepresented in any way the true character of our responsibilities, and desire very much to see the school board succeed in meeting its goals and objectives and creating the strategies that are necessary to accomplish that. But relative to the budget, we are the residents, 12 of us in this community, that want to make sure that we give the voters the information that they need to vote on. And without gaming the voters in any way, shape, or form, we're trying to tell them what we think is prudent and necessary. And this is a democracy. They get to make a decision. They can vote up by 10% according to our state laws, or they can vote down to almost any extent they want. Thus, of course, Senate Bill 2 requiring the default budget, which for whatever political purposes it was originally created for, has only provided another impediment for local control to meet the actual demands of the voters. We only get one message every year from the voters, just one. It's a very clear message. After that, we have to try and be thoughtful. We have to try and understand, what they want. It's a difficult divinity to practice. But it is nevertheless in the hands of the Budget Committee to do so. Shane.
I'm still very new. I don't know the politics, and excuse my bluntness. But I dug into these budgets a lot, and I listened to Jason talk about the technology infrastructure. Is this the document? These are the cuts that we're talking about?
Those are the adjustments that the school board made.
Yeah. So Matt, do you agree with these? And excuse my bluntness. I'm just asking.
Am
I allowed to do that?
No. I'm sorry, Shane. You're not allowed to do that.
I'm not. All right.
No.
So the reason I ask is because when I went to these meetings and I dug in a lot and I listened intently, Jason had a lot of reasons why that he had a specific plan for his infrastructure rollout. I don't know anything about technology, but I do know that he does, and I know that he had a specific plan. And then we're talking about putting money into.
Shane, if I could just interrupt here for a moment. I think I'm beginning to understand what your interest is here. So when we get to the technology budget, well, I thought we stepped back for a minute into district-wide, but if we are in fact now in the technology budget, and I was calling for adjustments, would you like to make an motion for an adjustment, and then we can discuss?
Sure. Sorry about that. I was going to make an overall statement, but I think we should keep the technology budget as it was proposed.
And would like to keep the adjustments germane to the budgeting process.
So did I say that right? Should I just say it again? Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to maintain the technology budget as Jason proposed it, or as it was proposed in this book before these cuts. I don't know how to say this correctly, but
I know exactly. Could I give you a little piece of information?
let's do it.
Hold
Okay.
on, Matt, just one moment. Unless you're amending the motion, let's get a second and then discussion, and then
Sure.
you're up.
I'll second.
Okay. Shane, you'd like to speak to your motion?
I think I outlined it. Yeah. So Jason made a proposal to, I sat in the technology discussion meeting, as well as the planning and building committee meeting that Jason discussed with us. So I guess unless I'm missing something that happened in between those two meetings and today, I'd like, Jason had a really good plan. And there was a specific reason why he chose all the products. Unless something changed that maybe I don't know about,
Well,
that's why I think that that's accurate.
Yeah, there
missing something here?
are some things that change. Yes, I believe that Jason came forward with a list of improvements that. Excuse me. A list of improvements in IT library services that perhaps more appropriately needed to be spread out over time. And so the administration discussed it with him, and they came to an agreement for this proposed budget 23-24 school year. The school board, in reviewing the same budget, felt the need to make some adjustments downward in the budget. And I think I'm being fair by saying they were very concerned about what the voters would accept for an increase in the budget. And so now here we are looking at the same proposal. We know what the school board did and why they did it, but their charge is different from our charge. And again, I will say for myself alone that I'm not interested in speculating what the voters will and won't do. This is a democracy. They get to do whatever it is they're going to do. It's our job to give them the best information for them to make a decision on. And so that's why we are now in the business of making adjustments to the budget,
So,
in the positive or the negative.
so in light of that information, if Jason signed off on it, then can I take back my?
Well, it sounds to me like you're agreeing with the original proposal of the administrative budget.
I am.
Yes, Naomi.
Yes.
No,
Do you
this
want to-
Naomi.
Okay.
'Cause-
Yeah, I did ask Matt to wait until the motion was seconded to say the thing that he wanted to say, so I wanted to make sure he's on the list to speak. Matt was asked to wait. Yes.
I'm sorry, Matt.
Oh,
Go ahead.
you're sorry? Okay, good.
I was so busy trying to explain that I forgot where I was.
Happens to me all the time. What you don't know is I think Jason did a fantastic job on this budget. This started off with a complete inventory of every little, I don't know, device that we had in this entire school district. I don't know how many are there. What are we, 10,000 devices we have? I mean, in the, how many? Everything. Down to the switch, down to the cabling, down, it was just an enormous effort. And that was the basis of looking at the infrastructure on what we needed to do. You can't build a replacement plan until you know the aging and the shape and of what you currently have. So that was step number one, and that was awesome to get that done. I agree with everything he has in here, essentially. And I know he wouldn't have put it forward if he didn't find it appropriate. But we ported some money over from the ESSER grants. I guess I'm looking it up right now. It could be, hey, Jason, is it $82,400? Where's Jason? What? Yeah, $82,446. Yeah, $82,446. And we put that in the ESSER grant. We moved money from cleaning supplies. Remember back in the day of COVID, everybody had plastic shields and space shoe suits and masks and everything like that. And we had Clorox T360 machines that were fogging everything, and everybody complained because the desks were sticky with the electrostatic, sanitation devices that would just, clean everything, but it left kind of a weird residue. So we're no longer in that area right now, and so we took away from cleaning supplies that we no longer are using on a consistent basis, and we ported that over into take up some of the slack of this cut that was done that you see here. So there's $82,400. Let's call it $82,400 for just the sake of rounding it up or rounding it. That includes some of these items here. So if you total them all up, it looks like $125,000. If you take out $82,400, then you have the balance that was that was going to be the cut. Oh, I don't know. I didn't do the math. Yeah, I was waiting for Lee to jump on that one. I could tell.
With his succinct math, it was about 72,600.
Yeah.
Yes, Naomi.
Because you brought it up, I'd like to speak a little bit to the school board's motivations when we were planning the budget and behind recommending these reductions, just so that everyone kind of knows where we're coming from. I'm not intending in any way to obviously tell you what it is you should decide. Of course, you should use your best judgment and what you think the community needs. However, I spoke to this a little bit last week when I said, when I was talking about how all the pieces of the budget come together holistically and how the things that we need are intertwined and how they align with our goals for moving the district forward and for improving academics for our students and environment for everybody, teachers, students, staff. So when you look at it holistically, the proposed budget after our reductions is about $1 million over the default budget. And me personally, I agree. I think the default budget should be the default budget. It's the bare bones, and then we should ask for what we need. However, and my history admittedly is not long, but I go back and I look over history, and we have a history in town of coming in right around the default budget. And last year we did vote in a budget that was about $200,000 over default, and that was great progress. And this again is my personally, we didn't talk about this as much as a group, but I am concerned that to make meaningful change, incremental is sometimes better. And when I was thinking about it. And then the other piece that factored into our decision-making is the state funding and the situation with the state funding coming in and the difference between I'm going to get the names wrong because it was on my notes from last night's meeting and I don't have those in front of me. The
the SWEPT, the statewide education property tax, and the education trust fund accounts. So one of those, the money that comes from the education trust fund, is a grant from the state. The SWEPT money is a tax rate that the state sets essentially and tells the town you have to raise this much money. And I believe, and I might be getting this, that last year or this year we're going to get the same amount of money from the state, but $2 million less of it is going to come from the education trust fund, and they're going to make up that difference with the SWEPT money. So that was kind of, we were concerned. I mean, you're right, we were concerned about the tax rate. We were committed to our goals to improve educational outcomes and are concerned that we won't be able to meet those goals if the budget we propose is a huge difference, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I do love that everyone in this room is so passionate and wants to do everything all at once. I think that's an amazing thing, but incremental change, I feel like, is more lasting. And yeah, that's I think that's about it. The other thing is the reductions. We were working very closely with administration, and we asked a bunch of times, like, are these reasonable? Like, do you really, is this going to be enough to fund the district? And we felt confident that they were, that was true, and that they're going to be able to do what they need to do. The other piece that plays in is next year we will not be paying off the middle school anymore. So there's going to be a little more room to play next year in terms of budget. That's like $800,000 or somewhere in that ballpark. So some of these things, like maybe like with the technology piece in particular, we want to focus on those one-to-one devices because that's part of what the kids need to improve the academic outcomes going forward. And some of the other infrastructure stuff, maybe we can wait until next year when we have a little bit more leeway with that extra we have coming in. So that's my thoughts, and that's a lot of the school board's thoughts. And thank you for listening.
Yeah. The only rub with the bonded debt going down is it also decreases your default budget. So it's not one of those things where you can say, okay, now we've got extra under the salary cap, like if you were dealing baseball and stuff like that. It's when the bonded debt goes down, that gets taken off the default. So it doesn't give us any room like that. But still, from a tax rate standpoint and from a voter standpoint, it is a plus because it is money that over the 20-year bond period that we went through with the middle school is not going to be there anymore. So it's an opportunity to do something with. And let's not get into the SWEPT and the grant. The SWEPT is like you take $50 out of your right pocket and you put it in your left pocket and you say, you're $50 richer. That's what the SWEPT is. The grant is Uncle Joe gives you $50 that you didn't have before. That's what the grant is. That's the easiest way I can explain it. I've been dealing with this for I don't know how many years. I remember before the SWEPT, we had something called the Augenblick formula. Merrimack got $400,000. It was called the Augenblick formula because that was the name of the guy who did the formula, Mr. Augenblick. Cool name, right? And so, it went from $400,000 to $10 million in 1 year, and the tax rate went boom right down. It was around the same time, I think, as the high school. I think the 97 editions were being done. So,
I would be remiss if I didn't make some comment as chairman of this committee. The fact that our bond indebtedness may go down next year is truly insignificant to the amount of money that we need to invest in our school district to move it forward. I would remind everyone that we don't have the highest ranking in the state, and there are reasons for that. We're trying very hard to remediate that situation. We believe we're on the right track. We believe we have the right people in place. But the burden is going to fall on this community whether it values its education or not. And we have for a very long time, and I can testify to that because I've lived here and longer and participated than, well, anybody else in this room, and probably a lot of other people in the community as well. I have, in fact, been around the block. I know what incremental change is, and it's not a positive forward thing. It's a gravel pile. One step up and two steps back. And it's time for us to shed those biases and prejudices that we've had for a very long time about how we fund our community enterprises. This is a municipal corporation. It deserves to know the truth about its operations and let the people who are the stockholders in this corporation make the decisions that they desire to make. The SWEP charge, as Matt pointed out, is a tax placed upon the people of Merrimack to come up with the money that Merrimack needs. And then we have to have the property tax to come up with the rest of the money that Merrimack needs. So all of the money that Merrimack needs is going to come from the Merrimack people, the Merrimack businesses and the Merrimack industries, with the exception of the little bit of help that the Department of Education wants to believe they are giving us in some beneficent way. And do we not ever dare to ask for a second bowl of porridge? This is something that we're either going to be a community and fund properly or not. And the voters get to decide that. And our charge, our responsibility is to tell them what they need to do, what they need to have to accomplish what they say they desperately want. They can choose. Our job is to give them the best information to make their decision. One final comment, Naomi.
So it has two pieces, as I seem to be doing a great deal tonight. Some thoughts first. Shane, I agree with you that discussions that happen and then come forward to us outside of the budgetary units are important. But I think we also have to keep in mind that within the district itself, there's a desire to help each other, support each other, and make changes that will support the whole. And so our looking at the original numbers also has value, regardless of other discussions that have happened to change them after that point. The other piece is that I agree that things should be spaced out, but we're already doing that. This is already a multi-year plan, and the idea is to increase it to more years, if I understand correctly. Even with full funding, it's still a multi-year plan. What I would like to know, I don't know if the administration can calculate this for me, what level of reduction is possible that would fully fund these items? Because I've heard a variety of different sources and pieces. If we are saying we want to retain this technological advance for the district, we want to retain the technological long-term plan, but we know there's other monies that have been mentioned, what amount can be removed and still safeguard those technological purchases and improvements.
Well, you could remove the $82,400, and that would leave you with what Bill and I came up with. Say I rounded, but Bill did it. Yeah,
So say the sum again, just to be sure.
42,600 would be there.
And how secure are those funding opportunities?
Pardon me, Chuck?
How secure are those funding opportunities?
Oh, as far as the 82,000,
Yes.
money in the bank, the grant's approved, signed, sealed, delivered. Jason did the purchase order today. We're ready to rock and roll.
And what are the expectations of the grant?
Well, the expectations is to, it used to be to promote remote learning and everything like that, but now it's to kind of maintain the technology that we built up to continue on with the type of learning that was born out of adversity that really turned into something that is a little more desirable. And I'm not talking remote learning, I'm talking one-to-one devices where each student has their own device district-wide. I mean, it's been something that New Hampshire's been talking about for decades now. So it got us there quickly.
Chuck, may I just say also, the technology is, I think you all know, a perfect use of the ESSER funds, because we don't want to engage in what is well known as the funding cliff. This is, similar, if you recall back 15 years ago when we had the stimulus grant under the Obama administration. What we did not want to do is hire personnel who we could not retain through the operating budget once those funds went away. And this is the same, optimal use of ESSER funds as for technology. With the application of that, as Matt was just saying, the net decrease to the technology budget is $46,000. In that request from Jason, there is a certain degree of redundancy, so that there is nothing that we would forego that would represent any type of imminent failure or, distress points to our infrastructure or to technology in general. So I honestly think that, we're leveraging the ESSER money very effectively. And I do think we can forego the $46,000 for this year in the technology account. We've dealt with this for years and years and years in terms of technology budgets. But I think, as Matt said, what is nice about Jason right now is he is forward-thinking, is very carefully planning, has a well-documented, and is very fastidious about the inventory and recycling and reuse of computers. So we have a lot of faith in him, and I don't think there's anything that by reducing that $46,000 that is going to make us,
right,
type of distress point. May I just say also in the entire almost $444,000 that we presented to the school board, that Matt is an absolute fiscal expert. $240,000 of that is a reset of the salary base from salary savings. So that that is sort of a freebie, if from my perspective, in that we could have kept and banked that money in the budget, but we thought it was best to maybe set the salary base down by lower by $240,000 because of staff turnover and savings, so that we could use some of that money to apply towards some of the academic needs, some of the personnel, some of the alternative pathways person, the centralized registrar, which will help us with free and reduced priced applications. And perhaps we've heard from our state legislative delegation that will help with the acquisition of state aid. And with the furniture, the reduction, we've had a strong appropriation in the furniture account for many years. And so by this reduction of about $25,000, a little bit more than $25,000, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but looking at the entire $440,000 in reductions, we don't believe there's anything that will be crippling to us, and anything that we can't forego to some degree the following year. We have built up to some level of scale the replacement and acquisition of furnishings in the school system, so that with this reduction that we're proposing, no student is going to be without a very good quality desk and chair and any other instructional table that they require. So we tried to look at it very carefully and very strategically, following along with the school board. One of the priorities, I think you mentioned, Naomi, is not just incrementally budgeting, looking at our needs and where we can possibly reallocate and reappropriate monies. We've tried to do that.
Thank you very much. If I can try to facilitate where we are in this motion, I believe the intent of the motion was to restore the technology cuts as you described them. Shane?
Yeah. Now that we have the new information, it seems like 82,000 is covered with the other grant. We have the 42,000 that Bill says, 46,000 that doesn't affect anything. Sounds like everybody's in agreement. So, with that information,
Well, it sounds like they're in agreement.
Well, no, if we're not losing anything out on it, I'd feel as well, if we're, out of the 120,000, we get 75% of it covered. The other 25% isn't affecting anything until next year. I didn't know that information when I made the motion, so sure. I am going to vote against my motion now. So if you want me to just cancel the motion, I can do that, or I don't know how technicality works, but.
Shall we amend the motion?
I think an amendment would be in order.
Yes. Would you care to propose an amendment to your own motion, or shall it come from somebody else? Okay. Making sure that the numbers are correct. The number that can be removed successfully from the budget without having an effect based on other money coming in plus what was said is 46,000. Or is it the other number? 42.
Well,
42.
if you're starting from the original, you want to add up all the
Just
tech
give me a
stuff in
number.
here.
Starting from the original number, it would be 82,446 that you want to reduce it.
Let's
Right.
12,000.
Still taken care of within that other grant.
So we're reducing it by the 82,446.
That's correct, instead of
Thank you.
125,000.
Okay. So I would like to propose an amendment to the motion that would replace the lines that are currently referenced as technology infrastructure, remove those proposed cuts, replace that number with 82,446. Did I use the correct numbers?
Yes, the original
Thank you.
reduction was 125,000.
Correct.
Revised based on the remaining balance in the ESSER funds is 82,446.
Okay.
So that would be the amount of the reduction.
So we can remove that safely from the budget?
Yeah.
Yes. And propose that. Should I say it again?
Propose, yeah.
Did I hear, though, that the remaining balance at 43,000 is not needed at this time? Is that, or?
We can forego that.
Okay.
In our estimation, because there's a certain amount of redundancy in all of that equipment, the routers and switches and et cetera, so that we don't feel it puts anything at risk in terms of our technology infrastructure.
Yeah, and
you,
also
Rachel. That's a good point.
when you're building a budget for what is this going to be, 23, 24? Everybody knows how technology changes. I mean, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, we used to have, I don't know how many servers, individual servers for each little application that we have. And now we have a storage area network device, which is called a SAN, which I think is kind of a cool name. But, Jason says, and he knows how this is done, but I'd just like to say it because it sounds like I'm really intelligent. We can virtualize these servers. I'm wicked smart, right? There we go. We can virtualize all these servers and have redundancy of hard drives, and it's like Star Wars to me, but it's like everyday occurrence. He probably has a refrigerator that runs off of 12 hard drives. I have no idea, but it's really kind of a changing astronomically in the future, the technology. So what costs 20,000 right now could cost 10 next year, or there could be a whole different way of doing it that we don't need to buy the individual pieces of gear and we could consolidate.
So now that I think I've probably sufficiently confused you. what we're getting at is to support the reduction of 125,000, because the 82,446 of ESSA will be used to purchase, three-quarters of that, and we will forego the remaining $46,000. So the actual reduction would be the full $125,000.
Then if that is the intent, Shane, then it's probably, assuming Chuck agrees, withdrawing the motion and putting a new one is the tidiest way, because it's quite different.
I think you're right.
I'm not sure where the number 42 or 46 keeps coming up. I'm a little confused on that because at 125, we're going to reduce that by 82. 82,446, and
Right.
that'll leave us approximately 72.
No, it would be 42, it actually comes out to about
right.
42,550. So that's the amount we're actually
Okay.
foregoing, okay?
I was looking at 150 instead of 125. Thank you.
We're basically just cutting his budget by 40 grand.
Right.
But it's not, it's okay, it's 125, but it's not really, because 82 of it's coming from the other area.
There's another source, yeah.
So
That's
budget
right.
is getting 125, but he's only losing $40,000 worth of stock.
But the ESSER this year,
Yeah.
so you're not budgeting for it next year because you already have the purchase order.
I'm going to ask
Yeah,
that
I
people
don't
make
need to
sure
budget
that they
for it
turn on their
next year 'cause I
microphones
already
for the
did the
important
PO,
parts of the
yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
For all the new people, they really do plan on the future for things like that. I know there's lots of newbies on the board. So generally, and I know that Bill touched on it a little bit, I asked every administrator at every school when they were in this building if they were okay with the cuts that were made, and they would rather give up a couple of round tables this year than give up co-curricular activities, that gap between special education and regular education where they need to fill those and things like that. So they all feel like they're getting what they need. And they all said to me, we expect furniture to get cut and we can deal with that because every year we figure it out into the budget and we add a couple new things, right?
Well, but that is precisely the expectation that we have to change culturally in our school district. Absolutely, we have to change that. We're talking about zero-based budgeting here that represents what we need, not only for the next following year, but to prepare us for the year after that, and so on. And yes, absolutely, for any number of years, that disposition has been such in Merrimack. How much money are we going to spend? And then we'll decide what kind of education we want. And that's simply no longer tolerable.
No, so I think they're deciding now. That's why they want those other programs. They're willing to give up other things.
It's not up to them to give up anything.
But no, it's not. They're not.
It's up
giving
to the voters to
education.
decide
Right.
based upon the
But they're not
proper
giving
amount
up
of
education,
information.
Chuck. That's what I'm saying, is they're more focused on education now and improving those. Right.
Yeah,
So as a parent, I've watched this happen with my 18, my almost 17, and my 7-year-old. It has transitioned that they're focusing more on what to do with the students, and the voters are just now starting to pay attention. So I'm not going to argue about a couple of pieces of furniture when they're focused on better academic plans and carrying us into the next generation, right? I don't think any of them would give up anything that the school board voted on, that was recommended or anything, if they thought that they really needed it to improve the education of our students. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they would.
Well, I
think they'd fight tooth and
would
nail,
be
right,
I would
Matt?
be more than happy to build on that a little bit.
They don't think they can do it without it, they're not going to give it up, because now they're more focused on transitioning and improving things. I've watched that happen in the last 3 years that I've sat here, more than I have any other years.
The school district is not just about the children and education. It is an entirety that is a municipal corporation. Every single cog on every single wheel is important to the outcome that we anticipate we desire.
I'm saying the same thing as you.
Well, then that means we need tables when they've been in a plan to have tables, and nobody should have to be making sacrifices or judgments about, well, I'd be glad to give up this if only I got a little bit of that. It simply has to stop. This is zero-based budgeting. What does our school district need?
We're going to respectfully agree to disagree because it's just like when you
Well,
talk
then
about
let's
summer
just
sports
leave it at
programs
that
and
then.
stuff. Yeah, it's.
May I
don't
just
see
make
it
one
that
comment?
way.
That over the years, many years, I've seen school districts set a number and back into the programs. That's not the way to do school budgeting. You plan what is needed for academic success for students, for efficiencies in the school system, curriculum renewal, support services, intervention services, proper scale of staffing, programs that meet the needs of all students, for example, our alternative pathways program, so that the approach we take now, and I don't know what's happened in the past here, but I know what happens in school budgeting in general for many years. We set the plan. We set the plan out for about 3 years. Where are we now? Where do we need to be? And what kind of appropriation request do we need to make? And so I just want to let you know that that's the way we do it. We don't look at the default budget or set a number and say, okay, what can we afford? What can't we afford? What do we need to propose to the school board, to you, and to the taxpayers that represents the best educational program and services for students? So it's all based on needs. So I do want you to know that, because I've never been a fan of backing into a school department budget and therefore programs. We need to know where we need to be to service our students well, and that's what we are bringing to you and committed to bringing to you.
I would like to remind, we're currently discussing a motion in regard to technology. Yeah, I appreciate everything that's being said, and I think it's relevant, but let's get the technology bit perhaps done.
Chuck, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
You mentioned tonight, and you also mentioned it in a prior meeting, something about Merrimack's ranking amongst the various districts within the state.
It's not
And I'd
germane.
like to know,
Excuse me. It's not germane to the motion on the floor.
well, you mentioned it
It's not
in after
germane.
this motion.
It is not germane to the motion on the floor.
All right, can you please tell me when I should bring it up?
Send me an email.
Well, you won't get that during this meeting.
That's correct. I won't. Is there any other comments on the motion? Mike?
Is the motion currently withdrawn in its previous form?
It is.
Okay. Would you care to make a new motion?
Not really.
I would make a motion that we reduce the current technology and library infrastructure by $125,000. That is due to the funds, 75% of those funds at $82,000 coming in with this year's funding through an ESSER grant, and the other funding does not need to be budgeted in the 23-24 budget.
Is there any discussion on the new motion? Do we get a second? Who? Discussion on the new motion.
Point of clarity. So this is in a sense asking us to agree with the current cuts that have been requested. This is not in addition to those. This is a reflection of those. Thank you.
Comments? Call the roll, Pat.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And I so declare it. Rather than going through the rest of the departments, I think it's probably appropriate. We've covered enough ground already. If there are other adjustments in any department, now is the time, I think, to call for those adjustments. Mackenzie.
Chuck, may I ask a question that might enlighten whether I want to make an adjustment?
I'm sorry, I just recognized Mackenzie. You'll have to wait.
That's fine.
Thank you, Chuck. In speaking with the administrators of the upper elementary, one of the proposed cuts is the $3,800 for the 2 tables. And speaking with the other members of our group, we would like to propose adding back the $3,800 for those 2 tables. I believe it's my understanding that that's been cut. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No.
Well,
it's in the proposed.
Rather than using be cut or not, perhaps use language that suggests whether you want those tables to be included or not in the final budget.
So yes, we would like those included in the budget. We really feel as though it will help students. A lot of students sit at one end of the table or another, and that's really going to help the emotional as well as the social development of those students being able to talk with other students and not feel like they're all alone at those lunch tables. So we would like the $3,800 included. And I know Gina is on the phone and we have Michelle here. I don't know if either of them want to also speak to that motion as well.
Point of clarification. When I look at the cut list we have here, and you mentioned specifically J Muse, I see $3,600 as a cut.
So it was my understanding that they each costed $1,900. I believe that's what was in the
budget book.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was an error. Which is why
Then
I
I could
changed
have.
it
Then
to-
I made an error.
Yeah, a couple of weeks
Okay. Well, let's
So I had-
get that on videotape so everybody can see it. Okay.
You're not perfect after
Give me
all,
my
Matt.
close up.
I support your error.
Thank you.
So it should be $3,800.
It's documented.
This is Gina. Chuck, may I say something?
Yes, Gina. Well, wait, hang on just a minute. That was a motion you made.
Yes,
right?
correct.
And we had a second?
Second.
Gina would like to second it, okay. Would you like to speak to that, Gina?
Yes, please, Chuck. So I also met with J Muse, and I met with the 2 wonderful principal, a ladies principal and assistant principal, and I really think it would be instrumental in, like what Mackenzie said, promoting the social and emotional development. We're already looking at a stressful situation where 3 elementary schools are combining into 1. So you have the fact that you may not be with a lot of your friends, you may not see them during the day, and you're with many other friends from different neighborhoods, from different parts of town. And, you know, the optimal environment for education is one where a child feels safe and protected and feels that their opinion is valued. And I think having a round table where there's no ends, there's no beginnings, everyone has a seat at that table, everyone can see everyone, so there's equal opportunity for engagement, because I think what happens inside the classroom as well as what happens outside, like in the gym, in the cafeteria, on the playground, is just as important for developing these young little minds. And I just think that I understand that it's supposed to be a phased approach, but I think there's been so much success with that table. I personally would love to see it in every school. I mean, I think it's great. So I wholeheartedly agree with this, and I think it's a really great way to promote what we've all been talking about. How can we promote, more confident kids who, are engaged and, feel that their opinion is valued and can be seen and heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Carol, you had a comment?
Well, no, I think we need to finish this motion and then let me ask my question after that.
Okay. Are there any other comments on the motion? Yes, Rachel.
Thank you, Chuck. From other discussions that I'm hearing of, some of the other schools that may be able to forego some of the furniture purchases, I would just like to throw out for discussions kind of a two-sided thought process. Either A, we keep all of the furniture replacements in just because they are part of the structures of our schools and were there in the plan for a reason. But if those my other thought would be if the other schools truly can forego those and there's not a true need for replacement, is that we take, my understanding is that the upper elementary had a plan of about 4 or 5 years to replace all these tables, the rectangular tables with the circular tables. We're now at a 12-year plan. So my other thought would be to take, let's say $20,000, which is the total cost of the cuts for all of the furniture was about $25,820. But if we reallocate some of that funding and, replace about $20,000 worth of those tables, maybe we can get this 12-year plan now back down to closer to an 8 or 9 year plan.
Would you go ahead?
I just wanted to ask another point of clarity. Within the elementary school budgets and their descriptions of their furniture needs, they do evoke ADA. They mention that this is furniture that's necessary to retain or to enhance ADA accommodations in the furniture. I wanted to know if that was a more broad statement, if this was specific need, and if so, how that should affect our discussions.
That was a more broad statement, Naomi. We always want to be aware of the specific physical needs of our students and use adaptive furnishings when it's necessary and when we think it's helpful. So we take that approach every single year. There is no one single year where more adaptive furnishings are needed than in any other fiscal year. So that's part of the furniture replacement model.
Rachel, if I heard what you said correctly, is that something that you're interested in offering an amendment to the motion for?
I believe, yes, if that would be an amendment.
Okay, could you pull the microphone a little closer to you?
Yes, I believe that would be an amendment.
Would you restate your amendment?
What was the original? To keep?
My motion was to keep the $3,800 in the budget that we have now for the two tables.
For the two
for
tables,
the upper
okay.
elementary.
So my amendment would be to retain up to $20,000 for furniture replacement, but it would be used for replacement of the rectangular tables at the upper elementary to the round tables to complete their plan more close, sooner than the now 12-year plan.
I'm going, don't lose your language. Okay. We need it. I'm going to suggest that is beyond a friendly amendment, and either you would accept it as a friendly amendment so that we can move forward with it, or you would withdraw your motion, or we need to vote on your motion. What is your preference?
I will accept Rachel's amendment.
Thank you.
And I'll second if needed.
Comment on the amendment.
I think it's great. As in elementary schools, I can't think of anything that's more important than the inclusivity, especially with the increase in learning disabilities because of COVID. You know, I can't think of anything as an elementary schooler worse than being at the end of the table and not feeling like you're with your friends. And for 20 grand to cut that and to not give them that ability, I just don't see it. So I agree 100%. And I 20 grand nobody's going to see that in a difference to your concern, Naomi, about people not approving it. Nobody's going to see that. And the kids are actually really going to be affected by this if this gets cut, like legitimately. And for 20 grand, I think that's why we're here.
Mr. Chairman, may I just, for the sake of clarity, our original cut, making the correction from $3,600 to $3,800, was $25,550. So essentially, if I understand the motion correctly, we are stating that from our original budget that we submitted to the school board, we will be reducing not $25,550, but we'll be reducing the furnishing budget by $5,550, retaining $20,000 in the furnishings account. Okay.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Personally, I that $5 grand, I get 25 versus 20. I'm not seeing a big difference there. So
It was easier math with the table cost. That's all it was. So,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
If you keep it in and you need it somewhere else, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm fine with that. But if others are interested, I'd also just to keep it as in the book. If you guys are okay with, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Yes.
I have some concerns with that. The high school also asks about cafe tables. There are other people who are interested in reshaping their space, and we are potentially creating some inequity in terms of who has asked for furniture and who gets it and who doesn't. I would rather that if we retain it in an equitable fashion. I absolutely applaud what you're trying to do, and I think it's fair, but I think it may step a little too far in that direction.
This is Gina, if I may make a comment.
Yes, Gina.
I completely understand, Naomi, what you're saying. I just also wanted to point out that other schools have asked for funding for additional furniture, for new classrooms, new teachers, etc. JMUS is adding, I believe, 2 more teachers. They are not asking for any additional funds for those classrooms. They are repurposing furniture that they currently have, so they have not budgeted anything to account for the uptick in the student body increase that's coming with the fourth graders from the elementary schools. They're just going to make do with what they have. So I think that, yes, you may want to make it more equitable, but if you look at it kind of in that context where other schools are asking for money for different furniture and JMU's didn't, that, it would be more of an argument to say, maybe not the 25 or 20, but at the very least, the original 3,800.
Yes, Naomi.
I think that we don't know what other schools have not mentioned and chosen not to get in order to reach their number, and so it's difficult to make a comparison of that kind. I'm absolutely in favor of retaining the cafe tables for that school, but I do have concerns about taking a large chunk of other asks in order to dedicate it to that cause.
Thank you, Naomi. I totally agree with that as well. I think where I was going, just so you know, was what I'm hearing from the room. So where I wasn't in some of those other subcommittee meetings, but what I've heard through, the meetings when, the information was presented and just tonight as well, that's kind of where my train of thought was. If there was truly a need to forego some of that furniture, why not retain that funding and use it to complete a plan, that's there. But I understand what you're saying as well and agree as well.
One last round for comments on the motion. Dan.
Are we talking 20,000 or 25,000? I think we're.
It was.
The motion was for 20.
20,000.
Yes.
Would you like to make an amendment, Dan?
I'd like to amend it to restore all of the furniture cuts.
Second.
So in order to amend it, is it something you're interested in doing, or would you prefer to vote on your motion, or would you prefer to withdraw it and somebody else propose one? Those are 3 options. We can just vote on it, and if people want to vote no, we can then put forward another motion. You don't have to amend yours repeatedly, but you can if you like.
She has the amendment.
It was the amendment, but the original person retains the motion.
Well,
I agreed. I agreed with Rachel's and I withdrew mine.
Was it a withdrawal
Yes.
or an amendment?
The intent here is consistent across the participants. It's just a question of money.
If the previous one was a withdrawal, then I changed what I was saying. And it moves forward now to whether or not, Rachel, you would accept an amendment or whether you'd rather vote or withdraw.
I will accept the amendment.
Any discussion? Yes.
Just from a clarity
It's nice to hear it from down on that corner.
Thank you. I'm absorbing it all. Just clarity then, if we're reinstating the 25,550 that's on here, is that going just to JMUs?
Thank you. That's
No, it's
It's going to go back to where it was taken from originally, and is that your intent, Rachel? Okay.
because
Sorry.
originally stated it sounded like it was to drop their 12-year plan back down to 7 or 9.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I understood the original, what Rachel, because I was on those conversations and stuff, so I understand what was going on at JMU's. But I just wanted to clear that if I'm going to vote on this, am I voting to give all that 25,000 back to the specific line items, to the specific schools, or are we reallocating and just giving 25,550 to one school? Thank you.
Any other questions? Let's call the roll, Pat.
As I understand it, the motion is to retain all of the furniture proposals on this list in the budget, or to not make those cuts. How does that?
Yes.
That's what I got, to retain all the furniture, yes. It's not a question of restoring, it's retaining, because the money's there.
Okay, we're clear? Pat, please call the roll.
Okay. Michelle Mackey,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Mackenzie,
Yes.
Gina,
Yes, ma'am.
Rachel,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Naomi Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Michelle Bronchuk,
Yes.
Naomi Halter,
No.
Shane.
Yes.
12-1-0. The motion is passes.
And it is so declared.
Mr. Chair, may I just ask too, that if we have any money left over in that account, if you don't mind, I'm going to buy a couple of padded chairs for this side of the table. Because these are the most uncomfortable chairs. They must be low bid chairs. And so,
You will notice that the committee, I was going to say.
Well,
You have to come
those
early
came
to
from the
get-
high school conference room that were bought 20 years ago, you know, so.
I have been so envious of you sitting in those chairs.
Don't let him fool you. He was the master of low bid everything when he was.
Allow us to present you with our 2 extra chairs if you wish.
Back is killing me. No. That would make me feel better. Yeah.
Are there any other adjustments someone would like to make a motion to accomplish? Yes, Michelle.
I'd like to go back to what I originally wanted to ask before we went down this alternate path. Is that okay?
I'm asking for adjustments.
Right, but I don't know if I want to propose an adjustment until I get some clarification from somebody on administration.
About?
I'd like to propose an adjustment after Carol.
I'm sorry. I didn't quite catch that.
Should I proceed?
I would like to propose an adjustment after Carol does. Or it's
okay.
Bye, Carol.
Okay.
Sorry.
What I'd like to know is there's two items. One is in the high school budget and one is in the special ed budget. And I'd like somebody to explain to me the difference between extended learning opportunities director and alternative pathways to graduation director.
Yes, thank you, Carol. That's an excellent question. The positions, the nomenclature is one and the same. We are hiring, in fact, I'm interviewing in the next day or two a candidate for, it is a alternative pathways / extended learning opportunities director. That person is responsible for developing a program for those students who, for whom a comprehensive high school education is probably not the best fit. And we have not been able to accommodate those students over the years. And so last year I began to talk with the high school principal about my perceived need for, and our collective perception that we need some additional programming for about 30 to 40 students at the high school. But we also want that person who will be responsible for planning and implementing that program for those students, because it will be a little bit different than the traditional high school program. We also want that person to be in charge of extended learning opportunities, not only for those 30 or 40 students, but for all students. We will be taking advantage of one of the state organizations that consists of a lot of ELO directors of other school systems. We're going to be meeting with some of them to develop our level of expertise. What we don't want it to be is window dressing. We want a quality program, quality opportunities for students beyond the school day or during the school day for that part. So, Carol, that the two different names are actually one position that has that joint task of the extended or the alternative pathways program, but also that person is responsible for working on extended learning opportunities.
So that person would partially be contributing to the high school and partially to a more general special ed need.
Well, it is a program for all students, whether they are in the general education program or some of them may have IEPs, so that there won't be any differentiation there, although we will, when a student has an IEP, certainly we need to make sure that we fulfill all the statutory requirements of programming, but it is for all students.
Okay, but it is not two directors, one within the high school and one within special ed.
No, that is correct. It's one person who will be
Okay, that's the way it looked in the book, so that's what I was trying to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry if there was confusion over that. It's one person who will be located at the high school.
Okay, thank you.
So would you like to make an adjustment, Carol?
No, based on his answer, I'm satisfied. I thought they were trying to add two positions.
Okay. Adjustments to the budget. Michelle?
I would like to put a motion forward.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle Bronchek. We had
Thank you.
a little confusion with
Sorry.
Michelle's here. Go ahead.
That's okay. But actually, my maiden name is Mackie, so I get confused a lot when you say her name as well. I would like to put a motion forward to have preseason lacrosse for boys and girls paid for. I had 3 boys that, went through the high school and played lacrosse, and the fundraising is kind of a lot. So I kind of wanted to put that forward.
Yeah, because that can't happen.
Chuck, could that be repeated? I couldn't quite hear that motion.
Hang on just a moment.
Sure.
Michelle, I think at this point, there are some legal questions that arise around that.
Yes.
And so I don't think that motion would be in proper order. For clarification, she wanted to make a motion to include preseason practices within the budget of the school district.
Yes, and that is prohibited by the New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association.
Well, I understand that is the most convenient response, but not necessarily the response that we ultimately might like to entertain when a thoughtful discussion of how we provide equity across the board takes place. This is not the place for that this evening in the form of a motion.
Sure, and we'll be glad to have that conversation with you down the road.
All right. Any other motions? Michelle Mackey, as opposed to Mackey Bronchak.
So I would like to put a motion to put the money back in for the softball dugout for the high school, to retain.
Do we have a second for that motion? A second? Do we have deliberation?
Did somebody second?
You'd like to speak to your motion?
Yes, but I didn't hear who second. I didn't hear. Oh, thank you. So, in talking when the athletic director was here, and even the Merrimack School District on a whole, we talk about inclusion, whether you have a student with disabilities or those type things, and we want everybody to feel the same, right? But now we get up into the high school level, and they're playing sports, and they're going to other high schools, and other high schools are coming here, and we're essentially saying, well, the boys' baseball teams can have dugouts, but we don't have one for the softball team. And if we're losing students that are being involved in the athletic program, what are we doing to incentivize, especially where we have the girls that are decreasing at a higher amount than the boys are? We're not doing much to incentivize them if they're not having the same things that the boys teams are having. And again, because we're talking about softball, this is I'm not talking about any of the other sports or so, but I think that this is important, that we should recognize the fact that, the girls' teams are just as important and the girls' softball team is just as important, and they should have the same things that the boys do on the baseball side or whatever we're comparing it to. Hopefully that made sense. I apologize.
Further deliberation from the committee? Yes, Rachel.
I'll just make a comment that I think it's a good motion. I will support that as well. And just when we think about, a sense of pride, we talk about, pride in all of our schools, whether it comes down to our students who are excelling and doing great things out in the community, or down to how clean our buildings and fields are. When we have other towns here, and it sounds like this dugout is in need of replacement, I think it also comes down to the pride of our teams in school.
Any other comments? Michelle, Gina, Carol?
I'm all set. I'm good, thank you.
Was that Gina or Michelle?
That was
I'm all
Gina.
set.
I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
I'm all set.
Okay. I couldn't agree with you more. This is, after all, the 21st century, isn't it? And while I don't think anybody has deliberately or with any, nefarious purposes or whatever, constructed any inequities. I think nevertheless inequities exist, and it's incumbent upon us to find out what they are and to remedy it in some fashion. And I think we've only just begun to discuss this particular subject. We know from our athletic director that there is about a 60-40 ratio, which in and of itself speaks to an inequity. But of course, we can't determine what the extent of those inequities are without information, without data, without a thoughtful introspection and an effort to meet the demands of Title IX. If for no other moral reason, we should be undertaking to show by example that we are supporters of gender equity in the way we do things in our school district. So yes, I certainly support the motion. Are there any other comments?
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Is there physical space for that dugout?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
It's been in the planning for a long time, but just hasn't had the impetus behind it to make it a reality.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, etc.? Yes, Rachel. Naomi, excuse me.
That's okay. I'm saying something because I feel like a Grinch voting no to all of these things, because philosophically I agree that these are all things that the district needs. And I wanted to clarify that I'm going to vote no a couple of times, but it's because the school board has already voted on this issue and I'm representing the school board position as it stands. Like I absolutely support a lot of these initiatives, and they're things that at the school board level we talked about, and we do have genuine intentions of doing them down the road. So I just don't want anyone to sit here thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's voting against that.
Well, that's all right. We understand that many of these things are down the road. We just want to make it a super highway and not a cart path. Pat, if you could call the roll, please.
Shane,
Yes.
Michelle Bronchuk,
Yes.
Dan,
With Title IX, yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Gina,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Michelle Mackey,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Mackenzie Murphy,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Naomi Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Ellen,
No.
and Naomi Halter.
No.
So that's 11-0. It passed.
So declared. Are there any other adjustments? Naomi?
I have two. I'd start with the bigger one. If we do look at the potential reductions, you'll see that there is a $239,000 reduction to the school board's reduction to the proposed budget. So I'm suggesting that we accept their reduction of that amount. My understanding is that this is money that has been reconsidered as opposed to actually changing any of the numbers of employees or pieces of that kind. But it's just a sense of what the actual cost will be and an adjustment accordingly.
Second.
Questions? Going once? Twice? Third time's a charm.
So which way are we voting? If we vote yes, are we keeping the school board cut?
My intent is that if you vote yes, you are keeping the school board's proposal to reduce that amount.
All right, thank you.
Pat, if you would call the roll.
Okay. Mackenzie,
Yes.
Michelle Mackey,
Yes.
Naomi Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Carol Lang,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Naomi Halter,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Michelle Bronchuk,
Yes.
Lee French,
Yes.
Carol Lang.
I thought I already voted, but yes.
Yes, you did. You're right. Gina Groff.
Yes.
And Chuck.
Yes.
And finally Rachel.
Yes.
That's unanimous, 13-0.
And so declared. Naomi.
This one's a little one. One other. It's actually referencing the budget book, so we'll go there in a moment. When the student services group met, we did identify one small area that might benefit from adjustment. I don't think that not doing this will be catastrophic, but I think it would be helpful to even this out. On page 22, within the student services section, you will see a line for ESOL, English as a Second Language supplies. And it is set currently at 1,000. It seemed to us that over time it had not moved upward with others to cover supplies in the ways that they were within the other comparable programs, and we wanted to propose that it be raised by $1,100 to $21, which will bring it on parity with the other groups in this category.
Did you say page 22?
Page 22.
There's a second on that?
I'll second.
I'll second. Oh.
Deliberation.
I'd like to know, I don't know whether it would be from our school board rep or from administration, but why that disparity is there.
If you don't mind, I'll represent the discussions within our group first, and then, of course, administration can pick up. This was mutually identified by the group as simply something that caught our eye. It wasn't, I believe, intentional. It wasn't that anybody's been deeply slighted or otherwise. It just was a tweak that we noticed.
And I would be supportive of that amendment because that's an account that can be quite variable depending upon the students who move into town and the various languages that they speak as their dominant language. So it can be quite variable.
ESOL supplies.
Comments? Well, I'd like to make a comment, not as the chairman, but as the town historian and the vice president of the Historical Society. This little report for 1919. The first principle of English as a second language in Merrimack was in 1919, and the J.F. McElwain Company provided a conference room for them to hold their classes in. We are on McElwain Street after all, and the Watson Park down in the center of town was where the J.F. McElwain factory was. They made the boots that carried our soldiers across Europe. And the very first teacher for our ESL, English as a Second Language program, was the Reverend John Wright. Now, I don't know if there's anybody here that actually remembers John or not. John was the minister emeritus at the Congregational Church here in Merrimack for, my goodness, forever. John was a friend of mine. He was a wise man who did a great deal in town. He was the gentleman that organized the owners of various parcels of land and convinced them that it should be preserved for the recreation of the town of Merrimack, which we now know as Twin Bridge Park, where the MYA meets and where we have 27 acres of gorgeous land available. He was a remarkable man in his day, and I can't help but marvel at the idea that in 1919 we had such forward-thinking people in our town as to begin English as a second language for the residents of Merrimack. Yes, and I support the motion. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, Pat, would you please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Gina Graff.
Yes.
Thank you. Michelle Bronchuk.
Yes.
Shane Albuquerque.
Yes.
Carol Lang.
Yes.
Rachel Papke.
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Mackenzie.
Yes.
Michelle Mackey.
Yes.
And Lee.
Yes.
Unanimous 13-0-0.
So declared. Are there any other adjustments? Yes, Naomi.
I have an idea, and I don't know if can I make an adjustment? Did all of you hear that the school board voted last night to demolish the Brentwood building using funds from surplus?
Hallelujah.
Right?
I do understand that you represented the community quite ably on that behalf.
Thank you. Is it feasible to reduce those line items associated with utilities for the Brentwood building from the budget? I want Matt's opinion first. Just like, I don't know if we need to leave them for any reason.
It all depends how quickly we get this done. We're in the process of, we're doing a scan for asbestos this week. It's going to cost us around $4,000, and we're having various demolition crews come in to give us bids. So there may be some upcharges to disconnecting, like the gas and everything like that, calling in, was it Liberty Utilities? So you can if you like, but it'll be rolled into the $350 if you would like to do that.
In any event, what incidental charges may be left will certainly be returned to the taxpayers as a surplus. That's very good news for the district, and I don't think there's anybody left that supports the red building, so it's too bad the red building supports itself.
The mood in the room when I brought it up was very much, oh, finally.
Lee?
If that is the case, that we are going to move forward finally, I think it would be a nice honor for Pat maybe to allow us to have a flag or something in her husband's honor. That as we demolish that, seeing as he was such a proponent of that demolition and advised us he would be on that D5 or D9 or whatever it was, that that we somehow honor that.
I would make a banner.
That would be my motion.
Yeah, that's the purview of the school district planning and building committee. There's all forms to fill out and everything like that, and I have them all ready. I know you do, Pat.
Are there any other adjustments? Yes, Rachel.
I'm not sure if this would be the right time to bring it up, or if you would like me to wait maybe until member comments. But it was something I picked up in discussions when Mr. Tuso was up talking about maintenance, and the comment of only having a half of a person that was added when the entire middle school was built, and we had all of the additional fields, so additional indoor space, additional outdoor space. So to me, it was something that should have been considered at the time of the project to add in the appropriate amount of staff that would support him from the maintenance team. So again, I know it wasn't discussed at all between any of the committees or school board, something I picked up on. So I don't know if it's more appropriate if it's a request to ask that they, look into that for next year, or if it's something we would like to discuss for this year.
Well, it's always appropriate to ask a question. That's for sure. I know that Matt has given this some thought, and I'll allow him to illuminate the situation for us.
Tom and I have been talking about this for a while. I think it took us a good 7 or 8 years to get the 0.5 position in. And this, we were talking about, would it be beneficial to bring that up to a 1.0 or 0.5? Every so often it comes up. And it's our thought process that, the individual who would be doing the work would be good as a half-time individual, probably around $25,000. So you could get somebody who wants to do some side work who comes in, who could also, during the winter months, help with snow removal, because that's always a very difficult task for us to keep up with, as you well know. And, with the enhancement of the grounds, it would be to take care of the fields first, as Tom mentioned, and any other things that we could start to branch off into. It would have to require additional people, although we do appreciate the parents chipping in for school beautification projects, as we say, the flowers and the plantings and everything like that. It's really nice. But yeah, I agree with that. That would be a nice thing. Another 0.5, just to help us out, because Tom said we can't keep up with it right now.
We have an opportunity to entertain that tonight. We are going to be revisiting again on the 16th. There will be other opportunities to make adjustments before we close our adjustment discussions. Would you like to frame that motion?
So Matt, I guess I would defer to you again. If this were a motion to be put forward for next year, do you feel it's something, that you would be able to fill? And, obviously there's a use for it. We're short. You guys can't keep up with, the work that needs to be done. Or would you prefer to defer? I guess it would be my question.
Well, Yeah, it's too bad we didn't have a conversation with the school board over this,
Yeah.
because for so many years, it was like, it took us forever to get the 0.5, and then once we got the 0.5, it was kind of like one of these things where, boy, that was a real tall mountain to climb, and then we just kind of let it lay. But I think it's a position we can fill because of its part-time nature, and I think it's attractive to a lot of people who would be looking for such. And so, you know, if we could get it for this coming school year, 23-24, I believe we could fill that with someone. We already have a retired person who's our other 0.5, Rainey Bolio. You guys most of you people know Rainey, and it would be nice to have some help for him.
Is there a possibility of getting a commitment from the school board prior to the 16th, if this was something they desired or not?
I think our next scheduled meeting is the 20th, isn't it?
I think so.
Well, I think then, given the scheduling difficulty, I would certainly defer to the school board, but I think the nature of this particular position, I think we can be excused under the circumstances for attempting to add a half-time position in maintenance. But it is, of course, up to the committee. So your motion is to add
Naomi,
a
do you want to speak?
half-time
Sorry.
maintenance individual.
Would you like to make the motion, or would you like me to put a comment in prior to?
I can make the motion if that's
It's a suggestion.
okay.
Yes. I'm wondering whether it might not be appropriate to ask for numbers for our next meeting, so that we have specific, it gives everybody time to think about it a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, to bring back what it would exactly look like, and then we could have a motion.
Yeah,
regarding it.
next meeting's going to be your public hearing, where you get public input, and then you're going to go through this whole process, you know, all over again based upon the public.
Well, some of it anyway.
Well, not all of it, you know. Although I've enjoyed the company, but it is almost 10 o'clock and it's past my bedtime.
If you will withdraw your motion, why don't we just leave it that Matt will bring forward, after deliberations with Bill and the team,
Yep.
what an appropriate amount might be, and perhaps they could gain some further insight as to whether there is in fact support or resistance. After all, this is the budget committee, not the school board. So at the next meeting, we'll have those figures as Naomi suggested, and we can make a decision from that point about what's appropriate for us to do as a committee. Is that satisfactory?
Yep, I agree. Yeah, that sounds like a good plan, and we'll have another opportunity to talk about it. So thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Any last adjustments to the budget at this time? Seeing none, we will close those deliberations. And
Matt and I are going to ask to wait on the final number while we figure out what got put in and left in and taken out. Between the two of us, we need to double check
Well,
that.
plus Bill's been taking notes too,
Right,
so
and I've
I've
been
got my
taking
hand
notes and-
scratching, he's got
So,
his, and
we don't have a number to give you for the budget article.
that's that's been held in abeyance, so
Yeah, you-
Very
we'll,
good.
we'll,
Keep it
we'll take
till
care of
next
that at the
Thursday.
I
next
haven't
meeting.
voted on it tonight anyways.
It remains in abeyance.
And it remains in
In
abeyance.
My wife would like to put me in abeyance, I think.
Yes, so, public participation. Do we have any public participation? Okay. Then I would very much like to thank Bill and Matt and Jason and Amy for coming out this evening, and all the things you could have been luxuriating in at home, you have sacrificed for our well-being, and we appreciate that very much. And so now we will go to member comments. Do we have any comments from the members? Carol, do you have any comments?
No, I'm all set.
All right, Michelle,
No, I'm all set.
Gina?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, you guys are going to have to sign off now, all right?
All right, everyone, have a good night.
Hang on,
Thank
wait a
you.
minute. Wait.
Have a good night.
Pat.
Well,
Right. Yes, Thursday, February 16th.
right.
All right, now you guys can sign off.
All right, good night, everyone.
All right, good night. Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Mueller.
Thank you. Second? All right, we are adjourned.
We don't want to actually.